I'm happy that we're talking about Punisher. That being said, not my favorite episode. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to The Critics. I am your host, Isaac Joel, and I'm joined by my co-host, Corbin Billings. Corbin, introduce yourself to the folks. Let them know how you're feeling today.
What's up, everybody? Hope that you're feeling great and enjoyed this episode of Daredevil that we're going to dive into. I'm here on behalf of the Color Matrix, giving some personality insight into these heroes that we love so much as we join them on their journey.
Episode 4, man, I think came quicker than I was expecting. I was anticipating them holding back on Frank Castle for a little bit longer. I can see them kind of like dangling him in front of us. You know, we know we're getting close to him, and they gave him to us, I think, very early on in the show. So I'm happy that we're talking about Punisher. That being said, not my favorite episode. I think I have way more issues with this one this week than I really thus far have loved and appreciated everything that has come beforehand thus far. But this episode for me took a weird turn, like absolutely weird. And I'll get into it. Let me explain myself. Last week I just remember us talking about White Tiger and how phenomenal that whole performance was and the character and how impactful the death was, man. And I was really looking forward to setting up the repercussions of that and seeing where all that would ultimately go. The episode 4 does start off with Matt Murdock, talking to his daughter, and they are discussing, justice, them looking for his murderer, them solving this and everything. So that is there. But once the intro goes and the show starts and this episode gets into it, all of that just kind of like, I don't know, for me kind of like dissolves very quickly because Matt is on this new case, man. He's already talking to a new client. He's already moving forward. And like, I understand that's his job. I understand that every day he's got multiple clients coming in and it's all like an emotional turmoil for him. I get that. But this felt very close to the chest. We're talking about the vigilantes and everything like that, so I was just kind of surprised to see Matt Murdock kind of just go on to the next case. And the next case had something to do with Fiddle Faddle Candy. Like, oh, dude, man, talk about just downgrade of a case, man. I just kind of lost all interest. Now, look, whenever Charlie Cox is in an interrogation room, whenever he's talking to a client, whenever he's talking business, bro, he is killing it. He has my full undivided attention, despite the fact that he's talking about candy. Oh man, I don't know, man. This episode took a weird turn for me. Corbin, let me know your thoughts thus far.
Okay, well, so I can understand why when they watch this show and they get to this point and they're saying, because even as a viewer, I have been given the benefit of having that first episode, and still here I am on episode 4, kind of halfway through the episode going, and that's because the story, there's these rich character moments, but once again, we're sort of being strung along in storytelling. Jumping from the case from White Tiger over to Leroy was a tonal shift, and they're dealing with two completely different issues of the system and forms of oppression. But there's these elements of this show that are so serious and grave, like where we get into the complexity of like Hector's death and being assassinated on the street. And then you have this tonal shift where we have kindergartners that are singing to Kingpin, or you have the same, and then they're singing the same song at Latvian Heritage Month Day. And I'm sitting here at a certain point and going, why? Now, at first, when they initially said it, I thought it was Latvian Heritage Day, and I thought that Matt Murdock was just making a cute little ploy, like it's like a call into Dr. Doom. No, it's not. It was Latvia, which is an actual country. Why are we on a side quest wasting this precious screen time, or let's say it's in a screenplay, this precious paper with Latvian Heritage Day? There's a core and a spine to this show that I believe was put in bookends with that first episode and then what we're building towards. So I can only say that I'm looking forward, but I'm gonna have to join you that this wasn't my favorite episode, although I found some of it quite charming. Kind of in like a way where I don't get the same feeling out of this show that I get when I watch Invincible. And we really got to talk about that, because that show in its third season hit. on a lot of different ways and was doing things that constantly left me feeling surprised. In the current trajectory of Daredevil Born Again, Matt Murdock is solving easy crimes that I can predict as a viewer before he arrives at the scene, to notice that the bullet just rolls down a hill and then goes directly into a gutter, and then you get the scene in the gutter and it's like the bottle he just rolled in and the bullet conveniently there. And it's like, these characters are deeper than this, deeper than some ways the plot is allowing them to be. I did appreciate the moment with Matt Murdock having to console Hector's niece in the beginning of the episode. Once again, that scene feels like we're planting a seed for later on to just bring in another superhero. I'm fine with that, but at least in that case, we'll have character stakes. And I like how where the episode ultimately leaves us is that they're regressing into who they really are, their old ways. Whether it's Matt training on his rooftop because he realizes he's getting to a stage where he's going to have to take things into his own hands. And then we also, with Wilson Fisk and Kingpin, we kind of see through the facade that he's put up into how he's actually dealing with his repressed trauma, his inner demons, you know?
Let's get into Kingpin Fisk and what he's up to right now. He's finally starting to take that dark, maniacal turn that we've been waiting for. He's Kingpin, you know. At the end of the day, you know, deep down inside, he will always be the Kingpin. He's, you know, going to therapy. He's talking to a doctor with his wife about their marital problems, and she was having an affair that we know nothing about, something that happened off screen. Was it during his election? Was it while he was gone between season?
I thought it happened in Echo.
It happened during Echo?
It happened in Echo,
okay.
and I just assumed it happened during Echo in the first, and I was like, well, I just missed that because I didn't watch Echo.
Yeah, man, I'm honest, and I think it really doesn't matter. You know, I think Fisk is always kind of coming and going. You know, he's always in and out of prison. He's always, you know, getting in trouble. So at one point in time, he was gone, and she was just messing around, which to me doesn't seem very like her character. I'm okay with like an affair and everything like that going on, but because of who we saw going back to the original kind of Daredevil show, you know, way back then, that is not the same person at all. She was head over heels for this guy. She would die by this guy. Like, he could do anything and she will always be there for him. That being said, I like that they're adding some tension to their marriage, but I mean, like, spoiler alert, like, dude's got her ex locked up in a cage where he's finally indulging and eating like fat sausage and chicken Alfredo and all that kind of crap, man. Like, you called it, dude. In the very beginning, it was like, all he's eating right now is eating, you know, eggs
boiled
and fish
chicken,
and, you know, yeah, just like nothing really. And I started to catch on to that. I was like, there's gonna come a time where he's going to just pig out. Don't know what that's gonna look like. And I think they took a really interesting way with it. The fact that he's doing that in secret, the fact that he's also living that secret life. That scene was good, but could have been darker. Could have been darker, man. I will say that. It could have been way darker.
Well, you got it right after it. They followed it up with a guy getting his damn blood drained out of his body for some sadistic art project. So it's not like the show's plenty dark. What I did think about it was so funny was, once again, it's he's having a cheat day. Vanessa had her cheat day, and now he's having his cheat day.
Brilliant writing over at Marvel. Well done. Muse starts the episode. I'm sorry, I don't mean to kind of like switch gears, but Muse, you kind of brought him up, and so I want to dive into that now. He starts the episode off, and then he ends the episode off. Very, very strange for me. I like looking at him. I love seeing the close-up of the mask. It kind of reminds me a little bit of am I saying his name right? From Watchmen. Not Warlock. No, that's not his name. Rorschach. Thank you. Rorschach from Watchmen, and I love that mask. But I at the end of the episode, I was like, a whole lot of nothing from Muse, man. 4 episodes in, they've built up kind of this guy doing stuff in the background. You know, I love the close-ups of like his art and everything like that. But like, man, where are we going with this guy?
Yeah, real random. Honestly, the way that it was added onto the show, it felt very tacked on, because
like,
we already just had sort of a
any episode,
value.
Anywhere, like anytime.
Yeah, and a good quality stinger would be like an example. I mean, cliffhanger wise would be last week, where we're left with, you know, who killed White Tiger, and then of course, are we going to answer that? I still believe the cops are behind it, but then, you know, had this thing, and this will get me. We'll loop back into Muse for a second, but Matt finds the shell casing, and I guess he can just touch it and feel that there's this Punisher logo that's on it, and then he just smells it, and then from smelling it, did he find the Punisher's secret hideout in New York City? I couldn't figure out how he found the Punisher.
No idea. I have no idea how he found him.
This is what I'm talking about with Latvia. I don't care about Latvia Heritage Month. I would like to actually understand how my superhero is going and finding my other superhero. I'm not going to take away from the fact that they had a really powerful dynamic in that scene. You know, when they're discussing, you know, at what point do you actually step in and take action. John Bernthal's performance was great, but I'm also sitting here and going, the entire conversation I was distracted going, how did he get here? How is he so gifted? But I believe that it was smelling the shell casing, but then I was going, no, well, then that means that would have been something that was fired from Frank's gun, or he just somehow already knew where the Punisher had kind of temporarily set up shop, because Matt Murdock would keep tabs on people like he told Wilson Fisk he does in the diner.
To be honest with you, that is how I interpreted it. I cannot wrap my mind around Matt Murdock smelling like a dog and tracking people down. Also, it's clearly, like, to your point, you kind of answered your own question there. Although you're raising good questions, I don't think the Punisher had anything to do with White Tiger's death. Therefore, I think Matt Murdock just does know where Frank is setting up shop. It seemed like the way that he was kind of going through those tunnels, and I love that scene too. Now that we're talking about Punisher, now that we're talking about John Berthel, like, I want to get into it, man. That is the only thing to me that is good about this episode, and I hate to kind of be that Punisher fanboy here, man. I really am die hard, you know, and I cannot wait for War is coming, man. They set it up in this episode when Matt was talking to the cop in the hallway, you know. It seemed like they were insinuating, like, you know, I'll be seeing you around, man, and I do believe that they're gonna go to war, and it's gonna be Daredevil and Punisher. They're gonna have to tag team against these corrupted cops. But that scene, yeah, man, no, it's. I love John Berthel returning. I just read this morning, actually, that he was hesitant to even return, that he didn't want to return because of the character that they had written out for him as Frank Castle just wasn't lined up to what he wanted to do with the character. I don't know what that insinuates, what that really was, what the alternative version was. We know that Born Again has gone through many, many rewrites and reshoots, so it makes sense. I'm glad that they finally cracked it, that they honestly finally came up with an idea that got John Berthel excited and wanted to be part of it again. Seeing him, you know, just do the classic stuff, dude. He's taking medication, you know, he's loading up, you know, he's ready. He's just always like unhinged, man. He's my favorite unhinged actor, my favorite unhinged character, man. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen The Bear, but he's really good. He makes like a small appearance in that show. I think the whole show is like actually based off of his dead character. But anytime John Berthel just shows up on screen, dude, it's electric, man. Literally, him and Charlie Cox. There was a moment, you were talking about the bullet and everything, when Matt takes the bullet out and like puts it down, the camera kind of like tilts. Or I think when he like punches him, when he like hits him, the camera like does this like tilt thing, and then it goes back to normal like really, really quick. Because, and you know, I'm just kind of like insinuating here, you know, it's shifting is Matt kind of like wanting to go back into that darkness, really wanting to get back into that, man, but he's fighting it. He's fighting to stay as stable as possible, the way that the camera needs to be. He's fighting to stay true to that. So I enjoyed those little moments and everything like that. But dude, the second he just like left the room was the second the episode was done for me, man. There was nothing really, I don't know, this episode was missing a lot of substance for me. And I'm not even saying that it needed action, dude. I don't even, you know, I think this is technically, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first episode that has absolutely zero like fighting or anything like that going on. No blood, no violence, you know, outside of Muse injecting a guy.
Maybe you could count Daredevil training at the end of the episode.
I wouldn't.
There's something that I want to
not at all. I would not count
here,
that.
Which is like inconsistency. So we've talked about this just even in the idea of going into the Echo show or from the Daredevil show into this one, that there's these funny inconsistencies. And I brought this up earlier about how Kingpin's had all of this reconstructive surgery, and yet his knuckles are still like bruised and bloodied. But then when we got that tag at the end of the episode today, I went, no, wait. He's been beating up Adam this entire time. Like, Adam hasn't just been put into that cage in between episode 3 and 4. I think that even before he ran for mayor, when he re-entered the picture and figured out that Vanessa was cheating, this entire time, he's been secretly beating this man. And so then I went, okay, well, that makes more sense. Now, following that with consistency, explain to me how he forgives Daniel Blake, his intern who rats him out.
Yeah.
That moment was so out of character for Wilson Fisk, because even there, I was sitting there as the viewer and going, okay, well, great appeal to being loyal to my campaign forever. Great, go pack your stuff, you're fired. Yeah. That's at least how I would expect him to react given his personality color tendencies, because he's so get it done now. Even when they're meeting at the dock and they're like, he has that beautiful little model that he's built of Legos of his whole vision, and nobody wants to pay any attention to it. And then he's like, well, let's take the first initial step that we can. But I think there's this inconsistency with suddenly he has this grace. Why does he have professional grace for Dylan Blake, who slanders his reputation in like also a really inexcusably unprofessional way of just being a twink in a club? And then you look at like the situation that's going on with Adam. Meanwhile, he's like, so in a way, maybe Adam has just become his punching bag, where it allows him to even maybe pretend like he's something that he isn't. But I found that moment where he actually spared that guy on his campaign to be so out of character. And I can't imagine what the payoff is going to be that makes that worth it. Because Kingpin's not a compassionate person. His only compassionate outlet is Vanessa. And that's why she's so unique, and even makes that moment to explain to the psychiatrist, there's 0% chance, as violent as he is, of him ever hurting me.
Yeah. Gandolfini, Michael Gandolfini's character betraying him was very strange, even for his character, dude. The fact that he's hanging out with reporters at the club, talking, blabbing his mouth, man. To be honest with you, I was watching that scene and I was like, this feels like something that would happen before he's on the campaign, before he's even part of Fisk's entire team, man. It feels like the early years, when he was in college, when he was partying, before he got the job, and then he had to buckle down. But no, this kid is still a knucklehead, and to be honest with you, I love the actor, dude. I really do. I don't really understand even his purpose in all of this, just being the young kind of kid that, like you say, he's just being a twink at the party, at the club, just enjoying his time, man. And when it came down to that moment where he kind of was like, listen, I take full responsibility, that made sense. I understood him kind of stepping forward because he doesn't want anyone else to really kind of get hurt. Like, he'll take the blame, man. But dude, it feels almost like this guy is just made to die. Like, eventually he's gonna do something that's just gonna really piss Fisk off, and he's just gonna kill him, kind of like a la Penguin style. They're this mentor, they take this mentee underneath their wing, and then as soon as they get close and you start feeling and sympathizing for them, they just cut them loose. Because I don't understand either his role in all of this, and then he's the one character to me that really should work. And I don't.
Yeah, he's felt out of place from the beginning, and initially in a way that I was joking about it. I remember when we very first watched the first episode, I sent you a text. I said, Dan Blake is carrying this whole show. Because there was a point where I'm going, why is Michael Gandolfini in this role? We'll see what it evolves into, but the political intrigue that they're trying to do, I would say along the lines of the detective intrigue, it's not the most complicated cases and sometimes, some of it allows Matt to really showcase his powers, like when he can listen into the heartbeat of the detective to actually hear that. Well, and I couldn't tell watching it. It felt like the detective or the cop that he was talking to in the hallway, that he was essentially accusing of murdering, he didn't actually know. No, because based on his heartbeat, I didn't hear his heartbeat accelerate.
No.
So in that case, now I'm thinking more as a viewer, like, okay, well, actually, who was behind that? And it's not just this crooked cop. Then what branch of crooked cops is it? I don't think that guy even has the tattoo, though, directly on his body of the Punisher logo.
No,
regardless,
I don't think so.
I appreciate it when Matt's superpowers play into him solving a case, and then other times I feel like plot is driving the narrative, not the characters coming to conclusions that then lead them to make another action.
No,
You know, and
I totally agree.
It's been reflective of a lot of the Disney Plus content. Now, what we can hope for is that as motivations become more crystallized, and obviously they did a revamp, moving forward, Frank Castle has all the reason to align with Daredevil, and he's already successfully, in our language, right, shifted him from thinking more along the lines of like, purple, I'll work within the system. I think that the thing that was going on with Leroy in this episode was just to show how absolutely inefficient and incapable the system is of getting anything done for anybody. That's the only thing that I can extract from his storyline, because really otherwise it is filler, like literally candy corn, cotton candy filler. But I think that was to show like Matt, you know, he can even work the system. When he goes and he talks to the other attorney in order to get him almost close to his probation, but 10 days, you know, you really see that Matt is good at his job. He's got great game, even when it's like professional game. And as best as he plays it, he still disappoints people, and that drives him crazy. He can't actually get the justice. Meanwhile, you have Punisher, who takes it into his own hands, goes full extreme red-green, needing vengeance and directly taking action on that. And what does that result in? He's got a whole cult. And I think that's what's getting to Matt Murdock, because if he's solving the case and also seeing, well, Frank Castle has all of these disciples. Who do I have? Nobody. And I actually lost Foggy. And that's the nerve that whole scene was really hitting on, which I'm glad that they finally said his name. I was like, Matt gonna go this entire scene and not actually say Foggy?
It's becoming more and more obvious, I think, to me at least, that the show is just kind of repurposed and reworked footage of things that kind of came before. They didn't want to get rid of some ideas. I think the original series just didn't include Foggy at all to begin with. So it does feel like he's just kind of like missing in certain areas. You know, there was a point, I think, in the first episode when he was constantly carrying his picture around with him, you know, from his funeral. And now we haven't seen that at all. That hasn't come up at all, because we moved on to other things. And it just feels like every week it's like, let's just move on to something new. And that for me is like losing the goal of like what are we trying to do and say at the end of this one season. You know, are we trying to stop Fisk from being mayor? Are we trying to get him out of the chair? Are we trying to get vigilantes the rights and freedom they need? Like what are we talking about? I literally said this yesterday when the show was happening, and they were going back and forth about fiddle faddle, man, and I literally just screamed out loud. I was like, what are we even talking about here? What is this? What are we? Like, I was literally just kind of like out of it.
That's how I felt.
Point.
That's how I felt in episode 3 when he was talking about the frogs. There are these moments where screenwriters, like modern screenwriters, really feel like they get hot and on when somebody's going into a personal reflective monologue. They did it in this episode when Vanessa starts talking about her dad who worked in textiles. She's like, my father, he worked in textiles. He was gone. All my relationship. I'd never told this to Wilson, but this is essential to who I am. And he's going, Vanessa, just look at my model. It's a beautiful model of what the ports could be, Vanessa. Our relationship could be like the ports, restored, strong, Vanessa. But anyway, I'm sitting there and watching her go so hard into her, like, the heritage in my family. We were a small family. We lived in the village where my father worked in textiles. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, I understand that we really feel like we're getting into the depth of the character, but I sometimes feel like a screenwriter they're self-indulging as opposed to actually relating a core character motivation.
You keep
Vanessa's a no-nonsense lady.
Up. You keep bringing the port seat up, dude. I want to point out that scene is pure absolute comedy, dude. Like, whereas
it's
like
so
let's
funny.
just compare it to the I forget what, I think it was like episode 2 when Fisk is talking to like the police commissioner basically at the funeral after the cop just died. And they're kind of going back and forth over like, look, I see right through you. I know you're just a boy and just hiding in the shadows. Like, I like that scene. I really do. I thought that worked. This was like the complete opposite of that, where she's like, you gotta do this first to get this. And he's like, okay, let's do that. She's like, no, you have to do this though. And then he's like, let's do that one. And they just keep going back and forth, dude. And I was like, watching the scene, I was like, literally any moment he's gonna strangle this woman if she doesn't shut up. If she doesn't stop talking and trying to convince him to not do his like big plans. He's just gonna snap and be like, oh, like literally. But I'm surprised, in my opinion, Fisk has shown so much restraint, not killing her and not killing Blake's character when it's revealed what he did.
Or killing any of the little children that were singing for him in the elementary school class. The funny thing is that there is some nuance here in the screenwriting, because they're showing that Fisk is losing all faith in the system as well. The same time that Matt is seeing that the law is incapable of actually helping the city, Fisk is seeing that the political system is incapable, whether it's infighting or he can't actually get the meeting or show up to the meeting to do the thing because of the way that
blue
it looks
tape.
from a PR standpoint.
It's always blue tape.
Or the red tape. So that whole scene that they had at the ports, right. So we call this the strong red personalities. That's Kingpin, direct, get it done. I want it done now my way. Versus that lady who's serving as sort of his advisor. She is all purple, which is system. There's bureaucracy. There's a process. We have to follow the rules. And red, these are both leadership styles, but one is heavily rule-based and one is heavily like personal willpower based. And I think that when at a certain point Fisk like having to show up for Latvia Heritage Day, maybe the absolute inanity or like the meaninglessness that I felt as a viewer being like, why is this in here, is the same thing that's making him go cross-eyed in that moment where they're singing the same song, you know, slightly different that he was hearing in the children sing, where he goes, why am I doing this? Why am I putting on this, why am I putting on a performance? And I know that for a point he wants to impress Vanessa, but this is why he's breaking and actually having his cheat day. He's not really fully ready to admit it yet, but he is still red. He'll never be purple. And I think the same thing goes with Matt. He's Daredevil at heart. That's why he like sneak away after you get your little love fest and then go and train on the rooftop.
That was hilarious when the teacher was like, we have one more song. He's like, that's not necessary. That's okay. We gotta go now. You just want to get, what could they possibly sing next? I'll have that We Built This City in my head, and not in a good way too. And I love that song. I'm not trying to be a hater, but the episode definitely ruined that song for me. I will say I'm grateful that this episode did give me one of the best Punisher lines that kind of like just represents, I think, every single superhero content ever, and it's when he goes, I do not have time for your candy ass hero nonsense. Literally, this is exactly how I feel now going into seeing Captain America, seeing the Marvels, seeing anything is like, man. Honestly, I don't have time for your guys' candy ass hero nonsense. Get to the point. Why am I here, man? What do you got for me? And you know what, man? I know we're comparing apples to oranges, dude, but I'm nervous about what they got planned for Avengers Doomsday, because it just seems like everything that we have set up, everything that they have built, like they just rush into these projects, man. And Doomsday had really no to zero like prep. We're going right into them shooting it, right into them like putting it together, dude. And it's just gonna be complete madness, man. Like, I don't know how they're gonna really pull it off, and in layman's terms, bring back Marvel.
We should do an episode where we talk about that, because I think it's entirely possible, and I think I know what the Russos are going to do. They're going to lean heavily into the relationships and their unresolved conflicts with variants from alternate dimensions where people have to work out their stuff with a different version of somebody. But anyway, we can get into all of that stuff. But I think that there is still hope. I don't want to lose it, but I think, you know, how the rest of the season ends, they've created a narrative that would allow me to have grace for the first 4 episodes of this show. They won't have that. Technically, it'll extend to 5 because they added the first episode. But when we reach the end of this show, if it doesn't have a extraordinarily different sort of payoff or finish than most Disney Plus content, then they're even going to burn that new hopeful, you know, up curve. And then it's really going to be even more on the Russo brothers' shoulders in order to revive Marvel with a big tentpole Avengers All or Nothing Doomsday. And, you know, we also have to keep in mind that it's not even just Doomsday. It's got to be Doomsday and Secret Wars.
Literally.
Fantastic Four is also a really big variable. We have no idea how Fantastic Four will perform. It kind of makes me nervous, man. But it's also exciting.
A lot of, and this is what I'm saying too, is we're juggling a lot, man. It's not phase one where it's clear, it's cohesive. We're juggling so many unresolved things in every single like project. We're talking Eternals, we're talking Guardians, Star-Lord, Vision, to me now Daredevil, Spider-Man. Like, where are these characters and how do they fit like in the grand scheme of all of that? I did read them talk about kind of like, if Endgame was the end of the saga, then what they're doing now needs to be the beginning of one. And it feels like that should have been that a long time ago. Yeah. So I don't know, man. We'll see. Going back to Born Again, I want to give this episode a rating. It's not my favorite. It's definitely one of the weaker ones. If I had to give it a rating, man, I'm gonna give it like a 4 out of 10. John Berthel is really solid in it. That one scene is really just about it for me. I think everything else outside of that is just pure absolute comedy. And it's funny. It cracks me up. I can't say I wasn't entertained and I wasn't laughing, man. And it gave me some of the most hilarious memes ever. John Berthel saying the candy ass thing, and then also Fisk jumping up and clapping. Like, okay, that's enough. Like, wanting to get the hell out of there. We got some hilarious memes out of this episode. Fiddle faddle, weird words, weird candies, and I don't know, man. Just a lot of strange things going on in this. This is definitely a filler episode, so I'm gonna rate it 4 out of 10 for me, man. Just not a lot of substance there. We'll see in the future. But Corbin, I want to hear, what are you gonna rate this episode based off of the others?
I'm gonna give this one a flat 5. I think that it was a good builder episode in terms of some nuanced character things that will allow for some hopefully deep emotional payoffs and some more cathartic aha that we experienced like in the first episode a little bit down the line. But I was not over the moon about it. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah. This week was very disappointing. I think, just speaking for myself, and it sounds like you too as well, Corbin. We're finally leaked on these episodes, but we'll see what happens next week. Seriously, I really don't know what to expect. Like that they name dropped Bullseye in this episode. Maybe I was kind of itching for a Bullseye episode, man.
I'm so glad that you brought it up. It felt like an 80-yard line. It's off screen when he says it, and even the fact that they re-brought him up, it feels like something that's going to lead to a payoff later on down the line. And like I'm saying, I think that, I'll say this now, how much I like this show will hinge on whether or not they bring back Bullseye and to what degree to actually allow Matt to get catharsis. Because if Matt's only seeking catharsis through exonerating Leroy, getting White Tiger's killer, or finding this new Muse serial killer who I'm only really learning about or getting glimpses to about 4 episodes in, no, I need a Bullseye, Daredevil, all out. And I need the Punisher and Daredevil to fight against the corrupt cops. I don't actually know what Muse is doing in this show right now.
I hate to sound so simple-minded, but my favorite television episodes are when every single episode is very focused on this like one thing, this one problem, this one character. It's almost like we're doing a character study on Foggy Nelson. We're doing a character study on Matt Murdock, on this client, on White Tiger, on Fisk now. We're gonna be more focused on him. For me, they're just juggling way too much, man. And I just feel like if every episode was just focused on one task at hand, then we would have something better here. But I do feel like we need to get a Bullseye episode. There is footage, I know this because it's in the trailers, of him in an orange jumpsuit being locked up, and there's even at one point where he's like outside of jail, it looks like. So there needs to get to a point, man, where I just have an entire 50-minute long episode of Bullseye breaking out of prison, him finding his way back into the city, him trying to like get his psyche back, man, and then boom, he bumps into Matt Murdock, and then there's an explosion there, dude. Like, that's what this episode should have been. It should have been very focused on Punisher, Frank Castle. What has he been up to, and how does he fit into Born Again, instead of him just kind of magically showing up like you mentioned earlier. What were you about to say?
Well, it's my last thought, but this show has a way of making you feel and relate for the people that Matt is defending. But the reason that you feel for them is because they monologue to Matt about how hard their life is or what they've been up against. We've seen it happen now a couple of times. And then I compare that to a show like Invincible. And Invincible will start off an episode where for, I don't know, 5 minutes it's silent, and I'm just watching the perspective from these criminal lowlifes. And I'm understanding that they're behind on their rent. They're trying to turn their lives around. They got a new job, but it didn't work out because they're disagreeable by nature. And then, you know, we're showing, not telling. And I think that that's an interesting conversation too, to contrast, you know, ultimately reflecting, looking back on Daredevil season 4 and Invincible season 3. Invincible season 3 it hit so hard. That's all I have to say though. Show, don't tell.
No, literally, that's the best kind of like anything, dude, is when you don't really hinge on spoon feeding your audience, you know, exposition after exposition. You know, they kind of can just look at it for themselves and absorb all of that information, man. This episode really definitely felt like a step back for me. We'll see next week. Every week I feel like we're being completely honest as far as like where we're leaving off with these episodes, how we feel. With this one, dude, it just did not hit for me. It's losing its momentum and its excitement. Hopefully next week's shift is and something changes, man. I don't know what it's gonna take, but it's gonna have to take something really big. I'm very curious to hear what it is you all think about Daredevil Born Again episode 4. Let us know in the comments below. Let us know if you thought this was the absolute greatest episode ever, or if you have some issues with it as well, and where it is you kind of like land on the scale with it. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And as always, we have been the Critics. We'll catch you next time.